Have you ever wondered how we got newspapers or books? Johannes Gutenberg interacted with communications and history by inventing the printing press in 1440. He decided to then wait to publish the printing press in 1450 while allowing Europe to discover and spread the word in the 15th century. China has now continued to grow this item and also allows us to participate in different jobs and/or activities around the world, in our communities, and even in our own homes. That shows how the printing press has changed how people communicate with others by allowing them to send important information across the world and affected the economy in different ways.
Johannes Gutenberg was known for creating the printing press. It was developed in Europe in 1436, which was way before the typewriter in 1874. In 1452, Johannes Gutenberg made an effort to create books in order to spread knowledge and stories across the world. He finally did later in the year of 1455. He ended up using 3,000 molded letter blocks and 50,000 sheets of paper. One of the most important things that were impacted was the written language. Books and newspapers became a lot more affordable because they were made quicker. More people could afford to buy books, so more books were made. Written languages were hugely impacted by the printing press because nothing could have been printed if it wasn't for the printing press, which means that everything would have been handwritten. Think about how many things you use in a day that are printed. Although things were different in 1440, they still had things that we use every day. Over the years, China has changed how the printing press has worked by placing new pistons in different ways for printing. By the 16th century, the printing press was able to print up as many papers as you needed, and by the mid-19th century, all of the developments had led to the first printer. Over time, the printer has still had many updates. The Chinese and U.S. state government has now led to the printer of 2021. Most historians would agree that the printing press played a fundamental role in standardizing languages across the world.
The printing press has affected people in many different ways and still continues to change the world today. Although the majority of impacts were positive, there were still some negative impacts too. One of the most common and most heard of impacts is it led to pollution around the world. People wanted to take advantage of the printing press because it was a new and found way of communicating. They also liked it because they were able to type long paragraphs instead of tiring out their hands and writing for hours. It was generally a more efficient way of communicating, but although it was a pretty cool feature of the communication world, a lot of people had a problem with it and thought it wasn't necessary. They didn't like the idea because they believed that it was important to support the original way of using paper to handwrite things. There was a bit of a disagreement between the different opinions, and the people who were against the printing press ripped up a bunch of papers and threw them. People discovered that this was an easy way to get rid of paper, but they didn't realize what they were doing to the environment. After time went on, people realized what was causing it to happen, and most of them stopped. But of course, there were still some people, and there still are some people today, who don't care and keep littering. Pollution causes toxic disease to be released into the air, which can lead to extreme illnesses and conditions or even death. Some of the illnesses are heart disease, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung cancer, and acute lower respiratory infections in children. There are many that argue about how the printing press was supposedly the reason for pollution and death. Although there were many negative impacts of the printing press, there are many positive impacts as well. The printing press has introduced a new variety of information and allowed Christians to be closer and connect with Christianity. As soon as the printing press was published, a high demand of newspapers overpowered everything. Was another very big thing that impacted everything in the medical field. Before the printing press, it wasn't easy or possible to hold medical information. Since the printing press, it has become a lot easier to keep medical tracts, medical prescriptions, and a lot easier to get and transfer the important medical information needed to transport somewhere. Medical IDs could be held a lot easier, which has now helped out with the efficiency of hospitals now.
The first printing press in 1440 has changed the economy and built a stronger relationship between the world. Even though it was different then, it has led to the printer of 2021. The printing press is also a lot different than what we have now because the printing press was big and bulky, but now we have printers that automatically do the printing for us. Back in 1440, you had to take hard work to operate it. Although the printing press and the printer sound like they are the exact same thing, they aren't. The printing press was meant to be installed in one place and never be moved. Also, the original intent of the printing press wasn't for an everyday use like most people use the printer. The impact on society was due to the advantages of the printing press over hand copying. The printing press could create many more copies at a faster rate than the best even describes. Printed copies are more accurate than handwritten copies as well. The printing press has done many things for us. That is part of the reason people say it's the most important invention of all time. The reason it's so important is because it affects how people do different things in their everyday lives. It changes how people work, learn, and discover. One reason people say that it might be the most important invention of all is because how it changed their lives. Without the printing press, people wouldn't be able to print the things that they print no matter what the purpose is. Before the printing press was a thing, it was hard for people to communicate. That could have negatively affected people because they might not have been able to communicate or contact with the loved ones they don't see as much. Before the printing press, people mostly relied on speech and handwritten messages to communicate. The printing press revolutionized the movement of information and expanded the number of people receiving news. This is why the invention of the printing press has communicated with history, because of all the effects in the way people communicate by being able to send information across the world. Because of this invention, this is why things are the way they are today.